For 41 years, I've carried a secret that would rewrite everything we know about the missing persons in our national forests. Not rewrite, erase, bury. The way you bury something you never want found. My name is Thomas Garrett. I'm 67 years old. 3 months ago, my doctor at Providence St. Peter Hospital in Olympia showed me the CT scan of my lungs and said the word stage 4 like he was reading a weather report. 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. I've never been lucky, but I've been silent. Silent for 4 decades while the disappearances stacked up like cordwood. 600 people a year vanish in our national forests. You read that number and think, tragic accidents. Poor planning, bad weather. You're wrong. I know what happens to some of them. Not all. God, I hope not all. But some. And I know because in November of 1983 I watched something that wasn't human, wasn't animal, bury a child with more tenderness than I've seen at any Christian funeral. I know because I broke every oath I swore when I signed that NDA. And I'm telling you now because silence makes me complicit. Because I'm dying, and the agreement specifically states it terminates upon my death. And my lawyer assures me imminent counts. Because 41 years is long enough to be a coward. Let me take you back to before. Before the fear, before the knowledge, before the choice that split my life into then and after. Back when I was just another federal employee with a mortgage and a simple belief that the world made sense. November 14th, 1983. Monday, I was 26 years old, 5 months married to Linda, paying $87,000 for a 3-bedroom Rambler in Randall, Washington, and pulling in $18,500 a year as a GS5 Forest Service Ranger in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. I'd been on the job 11 years if you counted my time as a seasonal, which I did. Started right out of high school in 72, got the permanent position in 76, and by 83 I knew every logging road, every creek drainage, every game trail in my district like I knew the layout of my own house. It was good work, honest work. You spent your days checking permits, marking timber sales, pulling drunk hunters out of ditches, and occasionally dealing with illegal trash dumpers who thought the forest was their personal landfill. The worst thing you'd encounter was usually a tweaker's meth cook site or a poacher with an illegal elk. The job wasn't dangerous, not like cop work or firefighting. It was bureaucratic tedium interrupted by long drives through some of the most beautiful country in the lower 48. That Monday started normal. Coffee from my Mr. Coffee machine at 5:47 a.m. I remember because Linda was already up, watching the morning news out of Seattle on our Zenith console TV. Something about the Korean airliner the Soviets had shot down back in September, still in the news cycle. She was worried because her sister Janet was talking about flying to Seoul for missionary work. I told her not to worry, kissed her goodbye, grabbed my lunch pail, ham sandwich on Wonder Bread, Lay's potato chips, a Granny Smith apple, thermos of coffee. I drove my service vehicle, a 1979 Chevy K5 Blazer, forest green with the USDA Forest Service shield on the door. It had 98,134 miles on the odometer that morning. I'd checked when I started it because I was due for an oil change at 100K. The truck smelled like pine sap, old coffee, and the Marlboro Reds I'd quit 6 months earlier, but whose ghosts still haunted the upholstery. In the back, a Coleman cooler, road flares, a chainsaw, steel ZO-28, emergency blanket, and 50 feet of rope. In the gun rack behind my head, Winchester Model 70 and 30-06, loaded with 150 grain soft points. Standard issue for dealing with aggressive wildlife, which mostly meant black bears getting into campground dumpsters. The radio worked until you got about 12 miles out. Then it was just static and ghosts of signals. That morning, I caught the tail end of Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler on KO 100.7 FM out of Olympia. Linda loved that song. It made me think of soap operas, which she watched religiously. General Hospital was her religion. Luke and Laura were her saints. The song faded around mile marker 8 on Logging Road 23, replaced by static, then silence. I clicked the radio off. The silence didn't bother me then. It was just part of the job, that transition point where civilization ended and the forest began, where the human noise dropped away and you were alone with Douglas fir and western red cedar and the occasional scream of a Steller's jay. I was headed to check on a complaint called in Friday afternoon by a Weyerhaeuser logging crew working the timber sale on Road 25. The foreman, guy named Dale Hutchins, had radioed in around 3 p.m. saying his crew was refusing to work a particular section. When I asked why, he got vague. "Smell," he said. "Real bad smell, and the guys are spooked. Heard something moving around in the brush, something big. Want you to check for a dead elk or bear. Maybe a cat kill." This wasn't unusual. Logging crews got jumpy in the deep woods. You'd get reports of growling that turned out to be wind in a hollow tree, or eyes watching that turned out to be light reflecting off tree resin, but a smell was tangible, probably a deer carcass, maybe one that had gotten gut shot during bow season and crawled off to die. I'd filed the report, told Dale I'd check it Monday morning, and spent a quiet weekend with Linda watching the Big Chill at the Sky View Drive-In in Chehalis. Monday morning, 8:15 a.m., I was at the district office in Randall doing paperwork. Filled out my 1093 activity report, checked the weather forecast, snow possible, temps dropping into the high 30s, and loaded my gear. My supervisor, Gary Paulson, told me to make it quick. He needed the Blazer back by 3 p.m. for a meeting with a timber company rep. I said no problem. It was a dead animal. 2 hours, tops. By 10:30 a.m. I was turning onto Road 25 following Dale's directions to the site. The sky had gone gray, that peculiar November gray that presses down on the Cascades like a wool blanket. Temperature was 38 degrees according to the Blazer's gauge. Light snow had started, not sticking, just dusting the windshield before the wipers cleared it away. The forest felt normal. I saw a black-tailed deer at mile 3, some ravens picking at something in the ditch at mile 7. Normal. At 11:43 a.m., I remember because I checked my Timex Ironman watch, the one Linda had given me for our anniversary. I reached the coordinates Dale had given me. There was a wide pullout where the logging crew had parked their equipment, fresh ruts in the mud. Empty now, just my Blazer and the forest and that gray November sky pressing down. I sat there for maybe 2 minutes, engine idling, heat on, just looking at the tree line. The job required me to investigate. Protocol said I should radio my location before heading out, but my radio only worked back near the main road. This was standard. You got used to being out of contact. It wasn't like now, with cell phones and GPS. You were alone, and you dealt with it. I killed the engine. The silence was immediate and total. That's when my life divided into before and after. That's when everything I thought I knew about the world died in the cold. The smell hit me the second I opened the Blazer door. Not immediately. There was a 3-second delay, like my brain needed time to process what my nose was telling it. Then it slammed into me like a physical force. I actually staggered, caught myself on the door frame, and my stomach lurched hard enough that I tasted copper at the back of my throat. It wasn't just death. I'd smelled death before. I'd found a hiker 2 years prior who'd had a heart attack on the trail, 3 days dead in August heat. I'd processed a suicide, a guy who'd shot himself in his pickup, found him after 4 days. I knew the smell of decomposition, sweet, cloying, with that underlying rot that gets in your sinuses and stays there for hours. This was different. This was death, yes, but layered with something else. Something animal, but not quite animal. Wet fur like a dog that's rolled in a carcass. Musk, sharp and acrid, almost skunk-like but heavier, oilier, and underneath it all, something chemical. Formaldehyde, maybe, or battery acid, that same metallic burning tang you get when you smell ozone before a lightning strike. My body reacted before my brain caught up. Heart rate spiked. I could feel it hammering against my ribs, hear my pulse in my ears. My hands went clammy inside my work gloves. Mouth went dry. Fight or flight response? Textbook. The same response you get when you round a corner and there's a bear 5 feet away instead of 50. I stood there, one hand on the blazer door, breathing through my mouth because nose breathing made my eyes water. I told myself, dead elk, gut pile from poachers, maybe a bear kill, something it cached and is defending. But I didn't believe it. The smell was wrong. Too complex, too layered. And there was something else my subconscious had noticed, but my conscious mind hadn't processed yet. The silence. Absolute silence. No birds, not a single crow, raven, or jay. No squirrels chattering. No woodpeckers. No wind moving through the trees. The snow had stopped, and in that pause between weather systems, the forest had gone completely, utterly still. In 11 years working these woods, I'd never experienced silence like that. The forest is never silent. There's always something, branch settling, water moving, an animal calling. But this was the silence of a held breath. The silence of prey freezing when a predator passes. I realized my hand was shaking on the doorframe. "Get it together," I said out loud, and my voice sounded wrong. Flat, absorbed by the trees instead of echoing. I reached back into the blazer and grabbed the Winchester from the gun rack. The weight of it, 8.5 pounds, walnut stock smooth under my palm, helped. Gave me something to hold on to, literally. I checked the chamber. Loaded, 1 in the pipe, 4 in the magazine. Safety on. I clicked it off. The sound, that small metallic click, was shockingly loud in the silence. My training said, "Announce yourself, make noise, let whatever's out there know you're human, you're big, you're not prey." But some deeper instinct kept me quiet. The same instinct that kept our ancestors alive on the savannah, that thing in your hindbrain that knows when you're being watched. I started walking. The smell got worse with every step. I was breathing through my mouth, shallow breaths, but it didn't help. The smell had texture now, weight. It coated my tongue, filled my sinuses. 20 feet from the blazer. I stopped and dry heaved, nothing coming up but bile and coffee. I spat, wiped my mouth, kept moving. The logging crew had flagged the area with orange tape tied to branches. I followed the markers, Winchester up, finger outside the trigger guard, like you're taught. My boots, Red Wing 2412s, oil-tanned leather, crunched on frozen moss. Every step sounded like a gunshot to my adrenaline-flooded hearing. 40 feet in, the terrain dropped. There was a ravine I hadn't seen from the road, maybe 30 feet deep, thick with sword ferns and devil's club. The orange tape led down into it. This is where the smell was coming from, rolling up out of that ravine like fog, visible almost, a miasma of wrongness. My legs didn't want to move. This is what people don't tell you about fear. Real fear, not movie fear. It's not exciting. It's paralyzing. Your body wants to freeze, wants to become small and still and invisible. Your higher brain is screaming at you to run, but your lizard brain has locked your joints because movement means detection. I stood at the edge of that ravine for, I don't know, 30 seconds? A minute? My watch said 11:51 when I checked, but I don't remember checking. Time had gone elastic, stretchy. My heart was doing something irregular, skipping beats, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips where they gripped the Winchester's forestock. Sweat ran down my spine despite the 38-degree temperature. My breath came in short, rapid gasps, hyperventilating, I realized distantly. The body dumping carbon dioxide, preparing for sprint or fight. Tunnel vision starting at the edges, classic adrenaline response. I forced myself to take a long, slow breath through my nose. Mistake. The smell rushed in, and this time I caught something new in the cocktail. Copper. Blood. Fresh blood, Not the old rotten smell, which meant something had died recently, which meant something had killed recently, which meant the thing that killed might still be here. My hands were shaking badly enough now that the rifle barrel wavered. I tightened my grip, tried to steady myself, took another breath, shallower this time, and that's when I heard it, not heard, felt the absence. The silence had a quality to it now, a pressure. Like the air before a thunderstorm, that heavy expectancy. Something was in the ravine. Something big enough to displace air, to create a zone of silence around itself. Every instinct screamed, "Leave. Get back to the blazer. Radio for backup from the main road. Follow protocol. Let someone else handle this." But I didn't move. Because in that silence, in that smell-saturated air, I heard something that didn't make sense. Breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. Not panting, not labored, just measured, deliberate. The breathing of something large and calm and completely aware. I was standing there. My finger moved inside the trigger guard. I took one step forward toward the ravine's edge and looked down. And what I saw in that moment, in that gray November light with snow starting to fall again, ended one life and started another. Because 40 feet below me, kneeling in the center of a cleared space among the ferns, was something that shouldn't exist. Something that was carefully, deliberately, gently arranging stones around a small, dark shape on the ground. Something that was 8 feet tall, even while kneeling. Something that turned its head and looked directly at me with eyes that were impossibly, terribly human. I want to tell you I kept the rifle trained on it, that I followed my training, maintained defensive posture, called out a warning. That's what the after-action report would have said if I'd ever filed one. Instead, I froze. Not the tactical freeze they teach you. The calculated stillness where you're assessing threats and planning responses. This was full system shutdown. My muscles locked. My breathing stopped mid-inhale. Even my heartbeat seemed to pause, that one terrible moment of suspension before it slammed back triple time. The creature was looking at me. Not glancing, not a prey animal's nervous check. Looking. Direct eye contact, sustained, the way a person looks at another person when they're trying to communicate something important without words. The eyes were dark, not black, but deep brown, almost amber in the gray light. They had sclera. White around the iris, like human eyes, not the dark on dark of a bear or ape. And they had expression. That's what stopped my brain. Animals don't have expression, not like this. A dog can look guilty or happy, sure, but that's projection. We read our own emotions onto them. This thing was expressing something at me. Deliberately, and what it was expressing was, exhaustion, grief. And something else I couldn't name then but recognize now. Resignation. It held my gaze for maybe 5 seconds, felt like an hour, then slowly, with obvious effort, turned back to what it had been doing. Arranging stones. My paralysis broke. Not all at once, but in stages. First my lungs restarted, a huge gasping inhale that burned going down. Then my hands remembered they were holding a rifle, though they didn't raise it, didn't tighten, just held it, loose, forgotten. I should describe what I was seeing, what it looked like. But here's the thing. For the first several minutes, I couldn't process the whole. My brain could only handle details, fragments, pieces of information that didn't fit together into anything coherent. Height, 8 feet, maybe more, even kneeling. Impossible to tell exactly because of the crouch, but the shoulders were level with branches I knew were 7 feet up. Hair, not fur, hair. Reddish-brown, darker on the back and shoulders, lighter on the forearms, long, 3-4 inches in most places, matted in spots with what looked like ice crystals or frost, wet in others, clumped together. Build, massive through the shoulders and chest, barrel-chested like a gorilla, but the proportions were wrong for any ape. The arms were long, but not freakishly so. The back tapered to a waist, then widened again at the hips. It was wearing no clothing, but something about the posture was modest, deliberately angled away from me. The hands. Jesus Christ, the hands. I could see them clearly because it was using them, and they were impossible. Too large, each one looked big as a catcher's mitt, but the fingers were long, articulated, with opposable thumbs. It was picking up stones, smooth river rocks, each about the size of a grapefruit, and placing them in a careful pattern, not piling them, arranging them with obvious intent. The motions were gentle, deliberate. Each stone was examined, turned, positioned just so. When one didn't sit right, the creature picked it up and tried again. The care in those movements was unmistakable. This wasn't instinct or animal routine. This was purpose. I realized I'd been standing there. How long? The light hadn't changed. My watch said 11:53. 2 minutes. 2 minutes of standing frozen at the edge of a ravine while something impossible conducted a ritual 40 feet below me. My training finally kicked in, but not the parts about threat assessment or defensive action, the observation parts, the cataloging parts. I was a witness now, not an officer. Something deeper than duty made me stay, made me watch. The creature was kneeling in a cleared space maybe 12 feet across. The ferns and undergrowth had been pushed back, not torn or broken, but carefully moved. In the center was a shape I couldn't quite see, something dark and small. The stones were being placed around it in a pattern. A circle first, then... My stomach dropped. A grave. It was building a grave. The creature reached for another stone, and that's when I saw the injury. Its left leg, just above what would be the knee on a human, was wrong. The hair was matted black with blood. Fresh blood, still wet. And when it shifted weight, I saw white through the clotted fur. Bone. Compound fracture. The kind that drops you into shock if you're not careful. The kind that gets infected, kills you slow in the wilderness. It was injured, badly, and instead of seeking shelter, instead of treating the wound, it was building a grave. The creature finished placing the stone, the sixth in the circle, and then did something that broke me open. It started to hum, not growl, not vocalize in the way animals do. Hum. A low, melodic sound that had rhythm and intention. It wasn't random, it had structure. Notes that rose and fell in a pattern that repeated. A melody. It was singing. My rifle lowered. I didn't decide to lower it. My hands just let it drop. Barrel pointed at the ground, forgotten, because I was listening to something that shouldn't be possible. Music. Simple, yes. Mournful. But music. The humming continued, and the creature picked up another stone. The seventh. This one it held for a long moment, turning it in those massive hands. And then, I swear to God, I swear on my wife's grave and my own death, it brought the stone up and pressed it to its forehead, touched it there, held it, and the humming changed. Broke. Became uneven, ragged. The sound it made then wasn't humming. It was sobbing. Deep, chest-heaving sobs that I felt more than heard. The creature's shoulders shook, its head bowed, and it held that stone against its forehead like a person clutching a photograph, a memento, something precious of someone lost. I'd seen that gesture before. At my father's funeral, in '76, my uncle had taken Dad's watch and held it just like that, pressed to his forehead, trying to somehow absorb or preserve the connection to someone gone. It's not an animal behavior. It's not instinct, it's grief, pure, unmistakable grief. Something in my chest cracked, not fear anymore. Something else. Recognition, maybe. The sudden disorienting knowledge that I was watching something I had no right to witness. An intimate moment, a private moment, a funeral. The creature placed the seventh stone, gently, so gently, and then reached into the center of the circle. I still couldn't see what was there, but I saw its hands move with infinite care, adjusting something, straightening, arranging. My eyes adjusted, the light shifted, and I saw small boots, child-sized hiking boots, red with white laces. My breath stopped again. The creature was burying a child. I don't remember making the decision to move. I don't remember thinking it through, but I found myself taking a step back from the ravine edge, then another. Not running, not fleeing, just giving space, giving privacy to something that deserved it. A stick snapped under my boot, loud as a gunshot in the silence. The creature's head whipped around, fast, predator fast, and for the first time I saw its face full on, not animal, not human. Something between. The face was broader than a human's, flatter through the bridge of the nose. The jaw was heavy, pronounced. Hair covered the cheeks, but thinned around the eyes and mouth. The mouth was closed, but I could see the shape of lips, actual lips, not just an opening. We stared at each other. I should have been terrified. It could cross that 40 feet in seconds. It was 8 feet tall, maybe 600 pounds, injured and potentially aggressive. I was one person with a rifle I'd forgotten how to use, but what I saw in its face wasn't aggression. It was fear. It was afraid of me. The creature's eyes were wide. Its breathing had changed, faster, shallow. One massive hand moved slightly, positioning itself to push up, to flee. And I realized it thought I was the threat. It thought I would hurt it, or worse, disturb what it was doing. Some instinct made me do something I'd never done with wildlife, never been taught to do. I raised my hands, palms out, empty, universal gesture. I mean no harm. The creature froze. I took another step back, slow, deliberate, making myself smaller, less threatening. The creature's eyes followed me. Still afraid, still ready to bolt despite the injured leg, but it didn't move. We were locked in this moment, this impossible moment of mutual assessment. I don't know what made me do what I did next. Maybe shock, maybe instinct from some older part of my brain, the part that remembers when we were also prey, when we also needed help from strangers. I spoke. "I won't hurt you." 4 words. Quiet. In the silence of the forest, they carried. The creature's reaction was immediate and impossible. It blinked, not startled, not confused, the kind of slow blink of recognition, of understanding, like it had heard English before, like it knew what I'd said. Then it did something that changed everything. It looked at me, then looked down at the grave, then back at me, and it nodded. Once. A clear, deliberate nod of acknowledgement. And then, I will remember this until the day I die. It raised one massive hand and placed it over the center of its chest, over where a human heart would be. Held it there, then extended that hand toward me, palm up, a gesture of, what? Trust? Request? Please? The meaning was unmistakable. Don't disturb this. Don't tell. I stood there, brain completely overloaded, and my mouth worked before my mind could stop it. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. I understand." The creature's hand lowered. Its shoulders relaxed slightly, subtle, but I saw it. Relief. It had communicated. I had understood. Then it turned back to its work, dismissing me. Not rudely, just it had more important things to do, the dead to bury, the grief to complete. I stood there and watched for 23 minutes. I know because I checked my watch after. 12:16 p.m. When I finally walked back to the blazer, 23 minutes of watching something impossible and beautiful and terrible. The creature placed 13 stones total around the circle. When it was done, it gathered smaller stones and filled in the center, covering those small red boots until nothing was visible. Then it gathered dirt and moss, layer by layer, building a mound. The hands that could probably snap a tree trunk worked with the delicacy of a sculptor. Pat, smooth, arrange. Pat, smooth, arrange. When the mound was complete, the creature sat back. It was shaking, whether from pain, exhaustion, or emotion, I couldn't tell. Maybe all three. It placed both hands on the ground in front of the grave and bowed its head. The humming started again, softer now, a lullaby, almost. I felt tears on my face. Didn't remember starting to cry. The creature finished its song, that's what it was, a song, and then struggled to its feet. The injured leg nearly buckled. It caught itself against a tree, bark crumbling under its grip. For a moment I thought it would fall, thought about how I might help, what I could possibly do, but it steadied, straightened, and without looking at me again, it limped away into the forest, moving slow, favoring the bad leg, each step careful, considered. I watched until I couldn't see it anymore. The forest swallowed it, and the silence remained. I stood at the edge of that ravine and tried to reconcile what I'd seen with what I knew about the world. Tried to fit this impossible thing into my understanding of reality. I couldn't. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I hadn't watched an animal. I'd watched a person. Different, yes. Impossible, yes. But a person nonetheless. A person with grief and gentleness and ritual. A person bearing a child they'd somehow tried to save, or found too late, or couldn't protect. A person who deserved privacy and respect and the right to mourn. I walked back to the blazer, got in, locked the doors, habit, useless habit. Sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, engine off, trying to remember how to breathe normally. On the passenger seat was my lunch pail, ham sandwich, chips, apple, thermos of coffee, packed by Linda that morning in a world that made sense. I picked up the thermos, looked at it, looked back at the tree line, and I made a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I grabbed the first aid kit from under the seat, white metal box with a red cross, standard Forest Service issue, trauma pads, gauze, antiseptic, medical tape. Not enough for a compound fracture, not nearly enough, but something. I left the Winchester in the blazer, deliberately. Locked the doors, walked back to the ravine with the first aid kit and the thermos. At the edge I called out, quiet, not wanting to startle. "I'm leaving supplies, for your leg." No response. The forest was still silent. I climbed down into the ravine, harder than it looked, slippery with moss and mud. At the bottom, I placed the first aid kit and thermos 15 feet from the grave. Far enough to not be intrusive. Close enough to be found. I looked at the grave, the stones carefully arranged, the mound gently shaped, and I did something my Catholic mother taught me. I made the sign of the cross. Didn't matter that I didn't know what was buried there, or who. Didn't matter that I was standing in a ravine making prayers over a grave built by something science said didn't exist. Seemed like the right thing to do. I climbed back out, got to the blazer, started the engine. The dashboard clock said 12:28 p.m. I'd been there less than an hour. I drove away slowly, checking the rear-view mirror, though I don't know what I expected to see. At the main road, my radio crackled back to life. Gary's voice. "Garrett, you copy?" I picked up the handset, stared at it. "Yeah, I copy." "Find anything?" What I should have said. Unknown creature, possible threat, need backup, need scientists, need someone to tell me what the hell I just saw. What I said, false alarm, probably just a spooked crew, no carcass, no sign of predators, all clear. "Roger that. Head on back. 10-4. I drove back to the office in silence. The radio stayed off. I had 3 hours to figure out what I was going to put in my report. I never did figure it out. Because when I got back to my cabin that night, there was something waiting on my porch. The first aid kit. Empty. Clean. The medical supplies gone. And next to it, arranged in a careful row, 3 smooth river stones, and a child's Kodak camera. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the 3 stones arranged in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. The Kodak camera sat next to them. A Kodak Colorburst 250, the kind with the built-in flash that took those square Polaroid-style instant pictures. Except this one didn't have instant film. This one had 35mm film, and the back was caked with dried mud. Linda had gone to bed at 10:30. I told her I was doing paperwork. She kissed my forehead, told me not to stay up too late, and left me alone with 3 stones and a camera that had belonged to someone who was now buried in an unmarked grave 40 miles away. I turned the camera over in my hands. The plastic was scuffed, scratched. There was a sticker on the back, partially torn, but I could make out Enifer and part of a phone number. Someone's name. Someone's daughter, maybe. Someone who'd written their name on their camera, the way kids do, claiming ownership of a precious thing. I should have turned it in. Should have called my supervisor, filed a report, triggered a search and rescue operation. Standard protocol for found personal effects in the forest, but I kept seeing those massive hands placing stones with infinite gentleness. Kept hearing that melody, that grief song hummed over a small grave. And I kept seeing those eyes, deeply, impossibly human, looking at me with something that transcended language. Don't disturb this. Don't tell. I put the camera in my desk drawer and went to bed. Didn't mention it to Linda. Told myself I'd decide what to do in the morning. Morning came. I went to work. Filed a report about the logging crew complaint. No evidence of animal activity or carcass found. Likely odor from natural decomposition in drainage area. No follow-up required. I didn't go back to the site. Days passed, a week. The camera stayed in my drawer like a bomb waiting to detonate. I'd open the drawer, look at it, close it again. What was I supposed to do with it? If I developed the film, what would I find? If I turned it in, what investigation would I trigger? What grave would I lead them to? December rolled in cold and mean. Snow came early, heavy. The logging crews shut down for the season. The forest went quiet with winter. I worked my shifts, came home, made love to my wife, watched Dallas and Dynasty on TV, pretended everything was normal. But every night, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with the same image burned into my mind, those red boots being covered with stones. December 6th, 1983. 3 weeks after the incident. I was at my cabin. We lived 15 miles outside Randall, a small A-frame on 5 acres that backed up to Forest Service land. Remote, private. Closest neighbor, half a mile away. Linda was at her sister's place in Vancouver for the week. Some kind of women's church retreat. I was alone, which suited me fine. I'd been jumpy around her, distracted. She'd noticed. Asked if something was wrong at work. I'd lied, said budget cuts, told her not to worry. I was in the kitchen washing dinner dishes. 9:47 p.m. I remember because I'd been watching the clock, dreading another sleepless night, when I heard it. Knock, 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 knock. Shave and a haircut. Someone was knocking on my door using the rhythm of the old joke. Shave and a haircut. 2 bits. I froze, hands in the dishwater. Nobody came out here at night. Not neighbors, not friends. The road to my cabin was unmarked, barely maintained. You had to know it was here to find it. Knock, 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 knock again, patient, deliberate. I grabbed the kitchen towel, dried my hands. My service pistol was in the bedroom, a Smith & Wesson Model 10, 38 Special. I kept it unloaded, Linda's preference. Fat lot of good that would do me. I moved to the window, careful, keeping to the side. Pulled the curtain back an inch. The porch light was on, 60-watt bulb, cast a weak yellow glow maybe 15 feet. I could see the porch, the railing, my firewood stack. Nothing. Knock, 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 knock. I jumped. The sound was coming from the door, definitely, but I couldn't see anyone. The porch was empty, unless whatever was knocking was standing directly in front of the door, pressed against it, where the angle was wrong for me to see. Unless it was tall enough that I'd have to look up, not level, to see it through the window. My mouth went dry. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice cracked halfway through. No answer. I stood in my kitchen, heart hammering, trying to decide what to do. Call the sheriff and say what? Something's knocking on my door in a pattern. They'd take 20 minutes to get here anyway. Go to the bedroom, load the pistol, or open the door. I don't know what made me choose the third option. Maybe curiosity, maybe something deeper, the memory of those eyes, that grief, that gesture of trust. I walked to the door, put my hand on the deadbolt. "I'm opening the door," I said, loud enough to carry through the wood. "If you mean harm, I'm armed." Lie. But a reasonable lie. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the handle, opened the door 6 inches, keeping my weight against it, ready to slam it shut, and looked up. It was standing at the edge of the porch light's reach, where illumination faded into shadow. 8 feet of impossible reality. The same creature. I knew by the matted fur pattern, the reddish-brown color, and by the injury, the left leg was wrapped, crude bandaging but effective. White gauze visible beneath strips of what looked like bark or hide. It had used the first aid kit. We stared at each other. It made no move to approach, just stood there, barely visible in the weak light, breath misting in the December cold. "You?" I whispered. It nodded, slow, deliberate. Yes, my brain was screaming contradictions, danger, retreat, call for help. But my gut, that deeper animal sense, said, it came here for a reason. It's asking, not threatening. I opened the door wider. "You can't come in," I said, absurd words in an absurd situation. "You're too big. You wouldn't fit." The creature's mouth moved. Not much, just a small motion at the corners that might have been a smile, or might have been a grimace of pain. It raised one hand, slowly telegraphing the movement, and gestured to something at its feet I hadn't noticed. A bag, satchel, maybe, made from leather or hide, with a crude strap. The creature picked it up, handled it with those careful hands, and held it out to me. An offering. I stepped onto the porch. Cold hit me. I was in jeans and a Cascade Timber t-shirt, no coat. 18 degrees according to my thermometer. The creature didn't seem to notice the temperature. It set the satchel down on the porch boards, halfway between us, then stepped back, giving me space to approach. I knelt down, keeping eye contact as much as possible, and opened the satchel. Inside, cameras. 7 of them. Different makes and models. A Kodak, 2. Polaroids, a Nikon, a Canon, 2 cheap unten pocket cameras, all in various states of decay, water damage, mud, scratches, and other things. A wedding ring, gold band, a man's wristwatch, Seiko, crystal cracked, a necklace with a small cross, a wallet, leather rotted but still holding together. Personal effects, the remnants of people. My hands started shaking. "Where did you get these?" But I knew. The creature was watching me, waiting for me to understand. I looked up at it, and it held my gaze. Then, deliberately, it moved to the edge of the porch where snow had accumulated. It knelt, wincing with the injured leg, and picked up a stick from my firewood pile. It started to draw in the snow, simple pictographs, the kind you'd see in ancient cave paintings, but clear, unmistakable. First, stick figure humans, 3 of them, simplified. Walking, then, a different figure. Also stick figure, but wrong proportions, too thin, elongated, head too large, body too narrow, limbs too long. The creature drew this figure approaching the humans, then drew the humans with X's over them. dead. My breath caught. The creature continued. New drawing. The dead humans. Then a figure that was clearly meant to be a Sasquatch. Large, broad shoulders. This figure was carrying, one of the dead humans away from where the exit figure was. It tapped the Sasquatch figure, then pointed to itself, then pointed to the drawing of the dead human being carried away. The message was clear. I take them. I move them. You're hiding the bodies, I said slowly. From that thing. The creature nodded. Why? It drew more. This took longer. The stick was crude, the snow limiting. But gradually, an image emerged. Vehicles. Square shapes with circles. Jeeps or trucks. Above them, a shape with rotors. Helicopter. Government vehicles. It tapped these, then made an emphatic slashing motion through them. No. Bad. Then it drew the elongated wrong figure again and pointed to the vehicles, drawing a line connecting them. Government, connected to the predator thing. The government knows about them, I said, processing. The government knows about these things that kill people. Vigorous nodding, yes. The creature drew more, the elongated figure attacking humans. Then many Sasquatch figures forming a circle around human stick figures. Protection. You protect us from them. Yes. And you hide the evidence because... It pointed to the vehicles again, tapped them urgently, then drew the Sasquatch figure with an X through it. Dead. They'd kill you if they knew. The creature paused. Then, carefully, it modified the drawing, added bars around the Sasquatch figure. Not death. Capture. They'd catch you. Study you. Yes. I sat back on my heels, mind reeling. How long has this been happening? The creature held up both hands, 10 fingers, closed them, opened them, again, again, again. Kept going until I lost count somewhere around 30 repetitions. Hundreds of years. This had been happening for hundreds of years. Jesus Christ, I whispered. The creature tilted its head, listening. Then it did something that stopped my heart. It opened its mouth and spoke. The voice was wrong, too deep, resonating from a chest cavity that must have been massive. The articulation was careful, deliberate, each word shaped with difficulty around a mouth not meant for human speech. Meant, nose. 3 words, heavily accented, guttural, but English. Perfect, unmistakable English. I fell backwards onto my ass, scrambling back against my door. The creature held up both hands, peace, calm, the same gesture I'd made in the forest. It waited until my breathing slowed. Then it pointed to the satchel of belongings, pointed to the drawing in the snow of dead humans, pointed to itself, and spoke again. We protect for... 4 more words, each one clearly painful to produce. We protect you. My eyes filled with tears. I don't know why. The enormity of it, maybe. The loneliness. This creature, this person, standing on my porch in December cold, injured, carrying the remnants of people it had tried to save or had buried with honor, trying to communicate across a gap that shouldn't be bridgeable. Trying to tell me, we're the good guys. We've always been the good guys. The cameras, I managed. The belongings. Why bring them to me? It pointed at me, then made a gesture, hand to heart, then outward, the same gesture it had made at the grave. Trust. You trust me. Nodding. What do you want me to do? The creature reached down and carefully picked up one of the cameras, the Nikon. Professional looking. It held it up, pointed at me, then swept its arm to indicate the forest. Then it made that slashing motion again. No. Don't take pictures. Don't document. Yes. It set the camera down, then pointed to its own eyes. Pointed to me. Pointed to the drawings in the snow. You've seen. You know. Then it placed both massive hands over its heart and closed its eyes, bowed its head. The message was unmistakable. Please, keep the secret. For us. For them. It gestured to the graves, the lost people. For everyone. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking. I was shaking. The magnitude of what I was being asked crashed over me like a wave. Keep silent. Let people stay missing. Let families wonder and grieve without answers. Let the truth stay buried in unmarked graves across thousands of miles of forest. Because the alternative was worse. Because the government, my government, knew about predators that killed humans and did nothing. Or worse, controlled them, studied them, used them. Because these creatures, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever name we'd given them in our folklore, were the only thing standing between us and something worse. I don't know if I can do this, I said. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep this. The creature looked at me with those terribly human eyes, and then it did something that broke me completely. It reached out, slow, careful, and placed one massive hand on my shoulder. Gentle. The weight was there, but not pressing, just contact, connection. The same gesture I'd made at Linda's father's funeral when I didn't know what to say. The same gesture every human makes when words fail, but presence doesn't. I know it's hard. I understand. But please. I reached up and placed my hand on top of its hand. My fingers didn't even halfway cover the width of one of its fingers. The fur was coarse, cold from the December air. Underneath I could feel warmth, pulse the air. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I'll keep it. The creature's hand tightened slightly, a squeeze unmistakable, then withdrew. It gathered the satchel, moving slower now. Tired. The injured leg was clearly bothering it. When it stood, it wavered slightly. Wait, I said. Your leg. Do you need more supplies? I have more bandages, antiseptic. It shook its head, pointed to the forest, then to itself, then made a gesture I didn't understand at first, circular motion with one hand, encompassing. Family, others. It had others who could help. Will I see you again? The creature paused, looked at me, then shook its head slowly. No. Why not? It pointed to me, then to the house. Then made a motion, hands coming down, pressing down. Heavy. Danger. This contact was dangerous for me. I don't care, I said, surprised at my own vehemence. I don't care about the danger. The creature's expression, and yes, it had expression, softened. It reached into the satchel and pulled out one more item. A piece of wood, carved. It held it out to me. I took it. It was warm from being carried close to the creature's body. In the porch light, I could see it was a figurine, maybe 6 inches tall. 2 figures carved from a single piece of wood, a human and a Sasquatch standing side by side. Both had their hands raised, palms out, the universal gesture. Stop. Enough. No more. A reminder, I said. The creature nodded. Then it turned and limped away from my porch, into the darkness beyond the light's reach. I watched until I couldn't see it anymore, until the forest swallowed it completely. I stood on my porch in 18-degree cold, wearing nothing but jeans and a t-shirt, holding a wooden carving, until my neighbor's dog started barking half a mile away and startled me back to reality. Inside, I set the carving on my mantel, made coffee even though it was past 10 p.m., sat at my kitchen table and stared at nothing. I'd just promised to keep a secret that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. They came 1 week later. December 13th, 1983, 11:07 p.m. I know because I was watching Johnny Carson. They'd just finished the monologue and gone to commercial, and I was debating whether to stay up for the interview segment or go to bed. Linda was already asleep. I was on the couch with a Coors Light and a bowl of Jiffy Pop, pretending life was normal. Then I saw the headlights. 3 sets of them coming up my unmarked driveway. Moving slow, deliberate. Nobody came up that driveway at 11 p.m. Nobody came up that driveway, period, without calling first. My stomach dropped. I stood up, killing the TV, moved to the window. 3 vehicles. Black Chevy Suburbans, mid-70s models, no chrome, no decoration. Government fleet anonymous. They pulled up in formation, military precision, and parked in a semicircle facing my cabin. Headlights stayed on, engines running. For maybe 30 seconds, nothing happened. They just sat there, headlights blinding, engines rumbling. Psychological pressure, making me sweat. It worked. My heart was jackhammering. Hands sweating, every instinct screaming, run, but where? I was 15 miles from town. The forest behind me went for days. Linda was asleep in the bedroom, and whatever was in those Suburbans knew I was here. They'd known where to come. The doors opened. 6 men got out, 2 from each vehicle, all dressed in civilian clothes. Jeans, work jackets, boots, nothing matching, nothing obvious. They could have been loggers or hunters or off-duty cops, except for the way they moved, coordinated, professional, combat spacing as they approached the porch. One of them, older, maybe 50, gray at the temples, walked ahead of the others. He carried a briefcase, leather, expensive looking. I opened the door before he could knock. Show of confidence I didn't feel. "Evening," I said, kept my voice level. "Something I can help you with?" The man smiled, didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Garrett, Thomas James Garrett, may we come in?" He knew my middle name. Nobody used my middle name. It wasn't on any paperwork except federal employment documents. "Depends," I said. "Who's asking?" He reached into his jacket. I tensed, but he was just pulling out a wallet, flipped it open. Department of Interior credentials. Name on the ID said Richard Tolliver, Senior Special Agent. "Mr. Garrett, we need to discuss a matter of national security." "May we come inside?" Not a question. Not really. "My wife's asleep. This won't take long." I stepped aside. They filed in, all 6 of them. Sudden, my living room felt very small. They didn't sit down, didn't make themselves comfortable. Just stood, positioned around the room, blocking exits. Subtle. Professional. Tolliver set his briefcase on my coffee table, clicked it open. "Mr. Garrett, on November 14th of this year, you responded to a complaint from a logging crew operating in your district. You filed a report stating no evidence of animal activity was found. Is that correct?" My mouth was dry. "That's correct." "And did you encounter anything unusual during that response?" "No." He smiled again. Cold. "Mr. Garrett, we have thermal imaging from a surveillance satellite that shows 2 distinct heat signatures in the ravine off Logging Road 25 on the afternoon of November the 14th. One human-sized, one significantly larger. Would you like to revise your statement?" The floor dropped out from under me. Satellites. They had satellites watching the forest. I saw an animal. Large. I thought it was a bear." "Bears don't build grave markers using river stones, Mr. Garrett." Silence. The weight of it crushing. Tolliver reached into the briefcase and pulled out photographs. Large format, professional quality. He laid them on the table one by one. The first, aerial view of the ravine, clear view of the stone circle. The second, me standing at the ravine's edge. Zoom lens, high resolution, my face perfectly visible. The third, the creature kneeling, placing stones. Side angle, unambiguous. The fourth, my cabin, night vision, green tinted. The creature on my porch, me in the doorway, clear as day. "We've been monitoring that particular specimen for 6 years, Tolliver said conversationally. "Female, approximately 19 years old, nursing a male offspring. She's been problematic, interfering with research operations, removing assets we've placed, disturbing sanctioned activity zones. I couldn't breathe. Specimen, female, offspring. They were talking about a person like it was a lab rat. On December 6th, Tolliver continued, that specimen made contact with you. Extended contact, 23 minutes. She communicated with you using primitive visual aids and limited English. She gave you personal effects recovered from 11 separate individuals who've disappeared in that area over the past 6 years. Is all of this correct? I couldn't lie. Not with the photos, not with satellite footage. Yes. And what did she tell you? This was it, the moment. I could tell them everything. About the drawings, the warnings, the predators, the government connection the creature had implied. Or I could lie. She didn't tell me anything. I couldn't understand what she was trying to say. Tolliver's expression didn't change. Mr. Garrett, you were observed making a verbal response to her communications. Our audio equipment picked up fragments. You said, and I quote, "The government knows about them." What were you referring to? They had audio. Jesus Christ, they had audio. I was guessing, trying to understand. She was drawing pictures I couldn't interpret. Mr. Garrett. Tolliver's voice went hard. I'm going to be very clear with you. You have been exposed to classified information regarding the existence of unknown hominid species in North American forests. You have been exposed to classified information regarding controlled predatory species operating under Department of Interior Management. These are matters of national security under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1969, Section 17, Subsection 4, which grants authorization for silence protocols. He pulled out another document. This one was on official letterhead. I saw the seal. Department of Interior, Office of Sensitive Wildlife Management. This is a national security non-disclosure agreement. You will sign it. The terms are as follows. You will never speak about what you witnessed. You will never attempt to return to the contact site. You will never attempt to photograph, document, or communicate with any anomalous wildlife. You will not discuss these matters with your spouse, your colleagues, your family, or any civilian authority. Violation of this agreement constitutes a breach of national security and will be prosecuted as treason. Do you understand? What if I refuse? Tolliver's expression hardened. Then we discuss alternative arrangements. What alternatives? He pulled out another set of photographs. My heart stopped. Linda, at the grocery store, at her sister's house, getting into her car. Your wife is very lovely, Tolliver said quietly. Teacher at Randall Elementary, correct? 2nd grade, 23 students this year. The threat was clear, crystal clear. You're threatening my wife. I'm explaining the stakes, Mr. Garrett. We take the preservation of classified information very seriously. There have been 17 confirmed contacts between civilians and the species in question over the past 6 years. 14 signed agreements similar to the one you're being offered. 3 individuals declined. What happened to them? They accepted early retirement packages and relocated. Alaska, primarily. Remote postings. They're doing fine. Living quiet lives. Away from their families, unfortunately, but fine. Exile. Or worse. I looked at the photos of Linda. Thought about those eyes, the creature's eyes, looking at me with trust. Thought about those careful hands building a grave for a child. Thought about that voice, struggling to form words. We protect you. And I thought about what they'd called her. Specimen. Asset. Problematic. How long have you known? I asked. About them? Since 1937. Formally documented since 1952. And the other things? The predators? Tolliver's expression shifted. Something harder. That's above your clearance level. They're killing people. And you're letting it happen. We're managing a complex ecosystem, Mr. Garrett. Sometimes management requires difficult choices, choices that protect the greater population. By letting people die in the woods, by preventing mass panic, by controlling information that would destabilize society. Do you know what would happen if the existence of these species became public knowledge? Every amateur hunter in America would flood these forests. Every government in the world would want specimens. Every military would want to weaponize them. The result would be extinction, and not just of the specimens. The predatory species would expand without natural population control. Natural control. That's what you call them? The Sasquatch? They serve a function. We allow them to exist because they're useful. Allow them to exist. I looked at this man, this government agent with his briefcase and his threats and his cold calculation, and I understood. The creature had been right. The government knew. The government had always known. And they'd chosen to let it happen because the alternative was worse for them. Not for the people dying in the woods. Not for the families left wondering. For them. For the control. For the secret. Where do I sign? Tolliver's expression softened fractionally. Relief. A wise choice, Mr. Garrett. He laid out the documents, pages of them, legal text I didn't read because it didn't matter. I was signing away my right to truth, my right to speech, my right to warning people. I signed on 12 different lines. Tolliver witnessed each signature. When it was done, he pulled out an envelope from the briefcase. This is a consulting fee, $50,000, cash. Compensation for your cooperation and your silence. You'll report it as consulting income on your taxes. We'll provide supporting documentation. $50,000, a year and a half of salary. Hush money. I took the envelope. It was thick, heavy. One more thing, Tolliver said. The specimen you contacted, the female with the offspring, she'll be relocated, for her protection and yours. You won't encounter her again. Where are you relocating her? That's classified. Will she be safe? Tolliver paused. As safe as we can make her. Not an answer. An evasion. They left at 11:43 p.m. The Suburbans pulled away in formation, headlights cutting through the December darkness, and then I was alone in my living room with $50,000 in cash and a soul that felt like it had been carved out with a spoon. Linda came out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Who was that? Work thing. Budget stuff. Nothing important. The first of 1,000 lies I'd tell her over the next 29 years of our marriage. I saw the creature one more time. December 20th, 1983. 6:17 a.m. I was on the porch having coffee, watching the sun try to break through the December overcast. Movement at the tree line caught my eye. She stood there. I knew now she was female, knew she had a child, knew her age, just at the edge of visibility, close enough to see, far enough to flee. We looked at each other across 50 yards of frozen ground. She raised one hand. Not waving, just acknowledgement. Goodbye. Then she placed that hand over her heart, the gesture I'd seen before. Trust. Connection. And then she made one more gesture, pressing motion with both hands. Down, away, go, leave, be safe. She was telling me to forget her. To let her go, that this was for my protection. I wanted to call out, wanted to tell her I'd signed the papers, I'd taken the money, I'd betrayed everything she'd trusted me with, but I just raised my hand, held it there until she turned and disappeared into the forest. I never saw her again. The years that followed played out exactly as Tolliver had promised. I got promoted to GS7 in 1985. Desk job, less field work. In 1987, they transferred me to Olympic National Forest. Bigger district, more money. Further from Gifford Pinchot. Further from memories. I buried myself in paperwork and regulations and the comfortable monotony of bureaucratic life. Linda and I tried for kids. 3 miscarriages, then we stopped trying. We grew apart slowly, the way married people do when one of them is carrying a secret that weighs more than love. She died in 2012. Cancer, cervical, fast and mean. I held her hand in the hospital and wanted to tell her everything. Wanted to unburden myself, wanted to explain why I'd been distant, why I'd wake up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, why I'd flinch every time the news reported another missing hiker. But I didn't. I kept my promise, kept my silence. The NDA said it terminated upon my death. Hers didn't count. I retired in 2006, took the pension, bought a small house in Olympi, and tried to live with what I'd done. Tried to reconcile the choices I'd made. And I watched the statistics. Every year, 1,600 people vanish in our national forests. The number hasn't changed. Some years it's higher, 1,800, 2,000. Some years it's lower, 1,400, 1,500, but it averages out to 1,600. The news calls it tragic accidents, poor planning, bad weather, wild animals. But I know better. I know some of those people, not all, God, I hope not all, but some, encountered something that's not supposed to exist. Something the government has known about since 1937 and has chosen to manage rather than reveal. And I know that somewhere in those forests there are others like her. Like the female with the offspring who trusted me with her secret. Who buried a child with such tenderness that it broke something in me I never got back. They're still out there. Still hiding the evidence. Still protecting us from something worse, even though we don't protect them. Specimens. Assets. Problematic. That's what we've reduced them to. 3 months ago, I got the diagnosis. Stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to my liver and bones. Dr. Peterson at Providence showed me the scans and said, months, not years. I asked how many. He said 6, maybe 8. I said thank you, and went home and pulled out the carved wooden figurine I'd kept for 41 years, the human and the Sasquatch, hands raised. Stop. Enough. And I decided, enough. The NDA terminates upon my death. My lawyer assures me imminent qualifies. Terminal cancer with 6 months to live counts as imminent. So I'm telling you now, before I'm too weak to type, before the morphine makes me incoherent, before the weight of 41 years of silence crushes the last bit of humanity out of me. I'm telling you that Sasquatch are real, that they're people, different from us, but people nonetheless, that they protect the forests, that they protect us, that they hide our dead with honor and grief when something else kills us. I'm telling you that the government knows, has known since 1937, has chosen silence and management over truth. I'm telling you that there are things in our forests that hunt us, and our government allows it because the alternative, public panic, mass hunting expeditions, international incidents, is more dangerous to them than a steady drip of missing persons. I'm telling you this, knowing it won't change anything. Knowing most people will dismiss this as the rambling of a dying man. Knowing that even if people believe me, they won't stop hiking, won't stay away from the forests, won't take the warning seriously. But I have to try. Because every time I see a missing person poster, I see those red boots being covered with stones. Every time I hear about a hiker who never came home, I wonder, did they get the mercy of a burial? Or are they still out there, alone in the dark? Here's what I know. If you're hiking and the forest goes silent, completely, utterly silent, don't investigate. Don't take photos. Don't try to find the source. Turn around, walk back the way you came, and don't stop until you hear birds again. If you find stones arranged in a circle or triangle, leave them alone. Someone's already grieving. If you smell that smell, death and musk and ozone, get out. Immediately. Don't worry about your gear, your pride, your plans. Just leave. And if you see one of them, if you're lucky enough or unlucky enough to witness what I witnessed, show respect. Show recognition. Remember that you're not looking at a monster. You're looking at a person who's been hiding from us because we've given them every reason to hide. A person who deserves better than what we've done to them. I have maybe 4 months left. The pain is manageable now, but it won't be soon. I've made arrangements. This account will be published after my death. My lawyer has instructions. The government will deny it. They'll call me senile, disturbed, attention-seeking. They'll produce experts who'll explain how terminal illness causes delusions. They'll bury this just like they've buried everything else. But it'll be out there. The truth, finally spoken after 41 years. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to be careful. Be respectful. Be aware that the forests here are older and deeper and stranger than we allow ourselves to think. And I'm asking you to remember, if you find a grave marked with stones, leave it alone. Someone, something is already grieving, and that grief deserves the dignity we'd want for our own. Thomas James Garrett, 1957-2020. Forest Service Ranger, retired. I kept the secret as long as I could. I hope it was long enough.